This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast for the Liverpool Echo. I'm your host, Joe Rimmer. I'm joined here in the office by the Latin flavours of Tom Cavilla. How are we, Tom?
I'm good, thanks, yeah.
You can say hello in Spanish to all our Spanish listeners or Latin American listeners?
Hola, todos.
Yeah, Tom's going on a little bit of an adventure to Latin America later this year, so you can maybe meet the listeners in person.
Try and find the next Alexis McAllister in South America, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Give him a shout on the Blood Red pod. Yeah, every answer from now on, Tom, I want you to answer in Spanish. Okay? You've been doing Spanish lessons. It's time to put them to the test.
I'm not sure I'll be able to answer everything, to be honest.
Oh, well, we'll leave that there, but we'll move on to saying hello to Sean Bradbury, who isn't Paul Ghost. You've come in late sub today, Sean, and you're there. You've got your air traffic controller headset on, remote. You're on mute still. No, you're off mute. You going to say hello?
Yeah, I'll say hello. I'm
speaking.
I'm doing a bit of live plane tracking still. Yeah. Any flights coming over from Nice or Wolfsburg or Southampton? I'm tracking.
Yeah, Southampton. Yeah, not very eco-friendly. Get the train, Romeo. It's been quite a week. Quite a week for all of us, really. I was tested positive for man flu towards the back end of last week, so was in a bit of a coma for 2 days there whilst Liverpool moved quickly to sign, and this is the moment of truth, Dominik Szoboszlai. I think I got that right. Right first time. You know, you get old, don't you, when you struggle to pronounce players' names. My dad will never be able to say this fella's name, ever. He still struggles with Firmino, who he calls Firmino. So I think Szoboszlai is going to be quite difficult for him. But yeah, Liverpool moved quickly, got it wrapped up, triggered his release clause on Friday, and brought him in Sunday, got it all signed, sealed, delivered. He was presented yesterday about 4:00. Sean, we'll start with you. You were in Glastonbury at the start of last week, so I'm sure you came home feeling fragile. Hang on, start of last week. I'm losing days. Are you? When did you come home from? You came home.
Last Monday. So yeah, just about now starting to feel fresh again. To be honest,
did the signing of Szoboszlai, did he wake you from your hangover?
It did. Yeah, I was having a nice Greek meal on Szoboszlai Sunday. So yeah, I kind of bored me mum and me auntie with some Szoboszlai facts and excitement while we were talking into our pita bread.
What did your mum find most exciting about Szoboszlai?
Everything about him. The fact he gets a shot away. I think she was quite pleased with that. You know, she wants to see some more goals in midfield. Does my mum? That's what she's been crying out for all this time. But no, really good. I'm delighted with this one. I think everything about the player in terms of what we have seen of him and heard of him on the pitch, off the pitch as well, and just the timing of it was good, wasn't it? I think that's a big thing. Like just when the window felt like it was really kicking into gear, and you're seeing a lot of Liverpool's rivals doing business, you just thought, let's get one more in before they go back to pre-season. You know, someone to go alongside McAllister. You saw Klopp, didn't you, a few weeks back, said he wants a couple of deals done by then. You know, appreciated that it's not always an ideal world, and can't guarantee that, but I think that's really good. But no, I'm really pleased with this lad. Claim to have seen too much of him, but the main thing that I wanted in terms of a midfield signing was when you look at the back end of last season and how that new formation was looking, was someone to step into that role that Henderson was trying his best in, ultimately was toiling in a little bit. You know, you want someone there who's a genuine natural option between the lines, is capable of hard work, but also explosive forward play, you know, and this guy sounds like he's a creator as well as a finisher. He can hold on to the ball. He could go outside of Salah and play on the wing as well. It sounds like he's really thrived as a winger. So that's an interesting one as well. You look ahead to January and Salah going off to Africa Cup of Nations for a few games. Maybe he's a ready-made replacement to go out on the wing. But like I said before, like, you know, it's the playing side of things, but it's also the kind of mental and leadership side of things that I'm quite excited about, because, you know, he's obviously only a young lad, but to already captain his country, I think is a big thing. And
strikes me as a very confident lad, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You can tell that from his initial LFC just interviews, whenever he's interviewed after a game. You know, he's short and sweet and to the point, but he obviously backs himself. But I always think back to that time under Rafa when virtually every player in the dressing room, or certainly, you know, the main fellas, were all leaders, weren't they? They were all captains of their country. A lot of them, you know, you had like even like the fringe players like Benayoun, but obviously Gerrard, Carragher, the defenders, Aga, Skirtle, Reina, Mascherano, Alonso. The list just keeps on going. So with Milner and Firmino and a couple of senior men leaving, big presences in the dressing room, if Szoboszlai can come in and provide a little bit of that straight away, I'd be delighted. But yeah, this is exactly what you wanted to see from Liverpool at exactly the right time.
Yeah. So on the YouTube comments last week said that we look like an interview panel. So Sean, do you think you'll get the job?
I would like to think so. If you're interviewing for someone to land planes at John Lennon Airport, I would like to think I'm a shoo-in.
Yeah. You haven't got much experience, but you've got the look nailed down. Tom, in between Light the Candle for me last week, were you pretty impressed with the way Liverpool did their business? It was like quintessential Liverpool in the transfer market, wasn't it? Hadn't really heard of the link. Here are the link. A couple of rounds of talks, triggering the release clause, and then having it all wrapped up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think they haven't seen many deals like that really in recent times where Liverpool have just got it done out of nowhere. I only really seemed to be that Fabinho and Jota one, I think, was similar as well. That kind of came out of nowhere a little bit and then was done pretty quickly.
To be fair, Alexis McAllister came pretty out of nowhere, didn't it? I mean, maybe a little bit more build-up than Szoboszlai, but in the way that they did it, it was fast and it was efficient, and they got it over the line pretty quick.
Yeah, and I think obviously that was important because it was being reported that Newcastle were also looking at him. So the fact that Liverpool have signed him instead of Newcastle, who are in the Champions League. Liverpool obviously going to be in the Europa League next year, and he's dropping down from being in the Champions League as well. So that obviously says a lot about how players still view Liverpool even after last season's bad year. I think it's probably the right thing to do, to be honest, in terms of going for someone like him instead of Mason Mount. Both are going to be about the same price. I think Man United are paying 60 in the end for him, double the wages of Szoboszlai. So
slightly older. I know it's only
a couple of years, but still, I still think if you're going to go for one of those two, I would have gone for Szoboszlai over him. So yeah, I think it's an exciting signing.
Yeah, can you say all that again in Spanish?
No.
Well, I've got a hospital pass for one of you here, so I'm trying to decide which one to send it. I'll send it your way, Sean. What does this say now about FSG? I mean, the start of last week, before this lad was really even linked, I mean, I can't remember. I did the pod last Monday, but I do remember a lot of talk, a lot of frustration with FSG, a lot of frustration with Liverpool, who seemingly were doing a lot of monitoring, but not a lot of moving when it came to players. Obviously, we had their rivals, Arsenal making a big move for Declan Rice, City going into the market, Man United cracking on with Mount. You could feel the fan base, the tension rising a little bit. But I think what's interesting is that when you sign a player with a release clause like 60 million, I think they have to pay that pretty much up front, don't they? Which had seemed to be a sticking point late last week, but they got the deal done. So obviously they got the green light in terms of finances. So is this a bit of a show of strength from FSG, from the people at the club? A bit of a show of ambition, or is it just kind of what Liverpool need?
I'll sit on the fence initially and say I think it's a bit of both. But I think this was always going to be quite a telling summer for FSG as owners, partly because of the reasons you've said there. There's a lot of clubs now with more money, with more resource. Obviously, Newcastle, Chelsea's conditions have changed. They're catching up with the likes of City and United, even in terms of spending power. You've got teams that fell out of the Champions League spots, including Liverpool. Obviously, you've got Chelsea who were much further down the table than they would have expected to be, and you've got Newcastle and Arsenal, kind of new blood and new money in the Champions League. And add to that kind of two other factors, I'd say, one of which is all the rumours surrounding what Liverpool are going to do, what Liverpool's owners are going to do in terms of the club and its future. Is it going to be a sale? Is it going to be investment? That's what we now believe it's going to be. That's what John Henry told told Dave Powell in his interview that it's going to be. They're looking for a strategic investment partner. So through all of that, you did want to see a commitment where it goes beyond infrastructure, which I think is the area where you can never question them, can you? They've made pretty much every single correct decision off the pitch. And it comes down to the on-the-pitch investment where the debate is. And the final thing I'll say is you go back to last summer where I certainly fell into the trap of thinking Liverpool would be okay after fighting on every single front and, being a few kicks of a ball away from a quadruple and, finishing with 2 domestic cups, but that feeling somehow a little bit of a negative, of a bit of a double consolation prize. I even at the end of that summer when Núñez had come through the door and there wasn't much beyond that. There was Carvalho, wasn't there, and a couple of other bits and bobs. Obviously, Arthur was a panic buy. We can all panic loan. We can all see that now. But I think there was. I will give the owners a slight pass there because I do think I think back to some of Klopp's interviews at the time, and I think even he was pretty convinced that what he had at his disposal was still good enough for Liverpool to challenge. And whilst there would be elements of transition with how Núñez fitted in and a different profile central attacker to what Firmino's been for so many years, I think that all of that caught Klopp and his backroom staff and the entire club off guard a little bit. You think back to the first game of last season, Fulham, the midfield was Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson. And I was thinking, here we go. We haven't seen this midfield a lot. It's the three main men playing in a midfield three. Let's see what happens. And what happened was they got legged, didn't they? And quickly last season, I think it just...
Deep tactical analysis.
Yeah, that's it. Just one word.
You don't need heat maps when you've got heat. They got legged.
No, just scouse terminology. That's all you need. But I think now you can say belatedly, and that's fine. And I think Jurgen Klopp would agree with that. There was an interview a few weeks ago, back end of the season, where he kind of copped for everything and said to Sky, it was one of those ones that comes out before a match, and he just said, so much has gone wrong this season and last summer, and it's on me. And I always wonder with the whole FSG and Minge Bags debate, how much of it is on the manager? He's a loyal man, isn't he? And often he thinks there are players here who I want to see, who've come through thick and thin with me, and I want to see them give their best for as long as they are willing and able. But I think there's a little bit. I'd almost use the word ruthless now in terms of what's happening this summer, because if you think back to those three lads who got legged, I think you can argue that Henderson has been replaced in the long term with Szoboszlai. I think you can argue Thiago has been replaced, possibly even in the short term with McAllister, certainly in the long term. So you're looking maybe at one midfielder who comes in as a number 6, and I know we're going to move on to discussions of potential targets there, who replaces Fabinho in the long term. So I think whatever side of the FSG debate you're on, this summer was overdue because of what happened last season. But the manager and I think the owners to a certain extent, the decision makers, if you like, they get a 1 season pass in my mind. And as long as this summer puts right some of the wrongs for last season, I'll be happy enough again. And 95 million spent, it'll be more than that, won't it? When you factor in agents' fees, wages, contracts, that's what we're led to believe is the bare minimum fees for McAllister and Szoboszlai. So I think there'll be more signings, there'll be more faces, and there'll be more rectifying what needed to be done.
Yeah, I mean, just to give my 2 cents on the whole FSG thing, and I think now, to me, this is the minimum they can do this summer, and they've got those 2 players in. But what they do next will sort of show whether they've got the ambition, because I look at it and think they're having to sign players this summer to make up for mistakes of the past. So, technically they should never have had to buy 3 midfielders this summer, perhaps 2, perhaps even 1 if they've done the right work previously. But they also need to make sure they don't make mistakes this summer for summers to come. So I think a centre-back is pretty necessary, because if they leave that, then we could see injuries to Matip next season, perhaps to Van Dijk, or loss of form, and we can see Liverpool suffer there. So, I think they've done 2 really good deals. They've not really, in terms of free transfers, of course, they've had big outgoings and they've got big wages off the wage bill. And I think that people don't take wage into account enough. Some of the big wages that have come off Liverpool had a very, very high wage bill, one of the highest, if not at times the highest in the Premier League. Some of those big wages have come off. That should free up some cash now. But they've made those 2 deals. I think if we see them go and make further deals, that would make a really impressive summer, because if they can get another midfielder, that really has that department looking really strong. Obviously, we're getting Gakpo at Christmas. I think that the forward line looks pretty strong going into next season. Maybe next summer they'd need another forward, but for now, I think they can get through, and then another centre back, and perhaps in January you look at whether you need a right back, whether the backup for Trent is adequate, and maybe a left back. This depends on what Simicast does. But what do you think, Tom? Is this a show of ambition? Is this just what was needed? Where do you sit on this debate?
I think it was just what was needed, really. Like you said, they haven't signed a midfielder the last 2 summers now, and Yeah, I think like what Sean was saying, Klopp was asked about it last summer and got quite defensive about it. He was sort of saying, we've got Elliott, we've got Jones, we've got all these other players. Why? I think he was actually saying, tell me who we should sign, that kind of thing, and got quite angry about it. But if you look back at that now, that interview, it does look a bit,
What gave the game away about that though is that they were actively trying to sign a midfielder in Tuchel. So it's not as if Klopp was closed to the idea of another midfielder. And maybe he was doing a bit of a public display of backing for his players, which is understandable for a manager. But I think Liverpool should not have to spend 120, 140 million on midfielders this summer. The reason they're doing so is because of their own mistake.
Yeah, I think Klopp had a point in the sense that they probably did have enough players in that position, but you couldn't rely on people like Keita and Thiago because they don't stay fit. So, and once everyone got injured at the same time, that's when it became a problem. So it was only really a problem because of all the injuries. And if they hadn't had all of those injuries at the same time, then they would have got away with it probably wouldn't have seen all the problems that we saw. We saw James Milner playing a lot more than he probably would have played if there wasn't all the injuries there. So he got a lot of stick as well. And so why are you playing Milner so much? He shouldn't be starting. But everyone seems to figure that was only happening because there was no one else to play there. So I think it couldn't have gone more wrong for them if it had tried last summer, just because of the way it went with the key players being out at the same time. So I think they're just probably looking at it now and gone, we can't really afford for that to happen again. And factor in, you've lost 3 midfielders this summer, the 3 that have left as a free agent. So if you're automatically losing those 3, I think they had to sign at least 2 just to make up for those that have gone. So if they get 1 more in, it's 3 out, 3 in. And it's a pretty big upgrade on the 3 that have gone. And Milner aside, I still think I would have probably kept him, but I think that was more of a decision from the out of Klopp's hands. From the sounds of it.
Money wise, perhaps. Yeah. Tom, staying with you, how do you see? Is this the formation that they play with Trent moving into midfield? Do you think this now underlines that is the way they're going to go this season, with Szoboszlai taking up the right hand side, what Sean mentioned before, Jordan Henderson role, perhaps McAllister coming into that role we've seen Curtis Jones play? Yeah,
it probably makes the most sense to stick to that, really. I mean, I would be surprised now if Liverpool just switched it suddenly and went back to a 4-3-3 or something else, because that was what was giving them all the joy at the end of the season. Teams had probably maybe worked them out a little bit, so Klopp was kind of forced to make a change with that new system. So, I mean, everything kind of suggests that's what he would be lining up with next season. It got the best out of Trent, so I think it would make sense if they carried on with it, to be honest.
Is there a slight worry, Sean, though, with that formation? And perhaps the players that they've signed give them the options to play like that, or in a 4-3-3, or perhaps in different formations further than that. But there's a slight worry with that perhaps people will work that out pretty quickly and find space to exploit behind Trent.
I don't think so. I think these signings give the game away that he's all in on that, because they're not traditional right and left sided midfielders in a Jurgen Klopp 4-3-3, are they? They're not grafters. Well, I think they are grafters, but there's extra elements on top of that, and they both come with the profile of certainly compared to Wijnaldum, a Henderson, and Milner, they're goal scoring midfielders, and ones who have technical abilities, I would say, that outweigh the ones we've seen at the heart of Liverpool teams in midfield. So I think he's absolutely gunning for that now. I think there will be times, as you say, when for sure that they'll go back into the traditional 4-3-3, within games and from the start of games. I mean, to be honest, if Trent is rested, which he'll have to be at times, and there'll be some games where he'll miss through injury, suspension, whatever, I don't really see who replaces him. And I think that's the one limitation of this system. But the key difference I see from how it was at the end of last season, when clearly there were elements to work on, and what it could be for the first game of this season, is all of the positions around Trent, or certainly the 2 advanced midfielders, the 2 attacking number 8s or number 10s, whatever you want to call them, as well as Jones did at the back end of the campaign. I think if that's McAllister and that's Szoboszlai instead of Jones and Henderson, that's a huge upgrade as to what you're capable of, the level of pressure you can apply on the opposition. Just that balls for Trent to hit them with between the lines to their feet. That don't get me wrong, Jones is a very capable player in that respect. He was a good outball last season in that formation, but I just think these guys could potentially be a level above. So, yeah, I think he's totally committing to it. And I think the really interesting thing now is the profile of number 6 that they look for long term, because I think with the two main names that have been linked, I think they offer something different. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next transfer, which hopefully is in this window. Hopefully it is a Thuram or a Lavia, and that will really give us a clue on what the next step is for that formation. We'll
talk to Thuram, Lavia shortly. I had a couple of texts from friends and a couple of people on Twitter saying what happens now with Jones, Elliott. But the way I see it now is that they just give you really good options, and I think that both those players sort of show perhaps Liverpool's thinking, in the sense that Jones played in that advanced position. He could get goals. He got a couple, didn't he, at Leicester. McAllister, like Sean's just mentioned, is a bit of an upgrade on that, but Jones can come in and do a job. Elliott, the same, really, playing on the right-hand side at times, again, can get goals. But again, you'd expect Szoboszlai to be an upgrade on that, perhaps get more goals. And I think for those two young players, this is good news. It's not bad news, because for Elliott, he played far too often last season, and I think it exposed certain limitations at times. I think he looked worn out at times. And I think with Elliott, he could do with just being managed a bit more, like we saw City do with Foden at times. And Jones obviously has had his injury problems. It was a campaign of, I wouldn't say two halves, it was like 2/3 and 1/3, wasn't it, last year, with some really bad injuries towards the front end of the campaign, and then finally him coming into the team and probably playing, well, not probably, definitely playing his best football for Liverpool in the last 11 games. And Jones will want to build on that. But again, for someone with a bad injury record, you don't want to push him too hard. So I think it's great that they will have the option of rotating in and out the side, and Liverpool will have horses for courses, if you like, or just, opposition at home. You could perhaps bring some of those young players in. So I think it's really exciting for them, and I'm really, really interested to see how Liverpool line up on the opening day of the season. Hopefully with a couple more options as well. But, I don't know whether both of those new lads will go straight in, but I think certainly one of them will. And maybe McAllister, because he's played in the Premier League. But it's really exciting. Okay, we'll talk to the others. We'll start with Thuram. Tom, he got knocked out yesterday of the Euros, so technically Liverpool can now sort of pursue that if they want. But perhaps it didn't go the way things were planned for him. They got beat, didn't they, France, and he got an absolute beasting from the French media, who they thought he was mad. Can I swear? I can swear in French, can't I? Because surely that doesn't leave us out of well, I don't know. But if we're not in Qatar anymore, I'm sorry. Of the Middle East, but I didn't know whether they take French swear words as well. But there you go. They didn't think he was very good anyway. Bit of a blow for him, Tom. I mean, are you still all in on him as perhaps Liverpool's next one?
I wouldn't say all in. I mean, he's looked good from what I've seen of him, but I'm not sure he's someone that Liverpool have to sign. I don't think if they missed out on him, I don't think it would be the end of the world. I think he's a player that people are getting quite excited about and want to see at Liverpool. But I think Lavia would be equally good option for Liverpool. He's got Premier League experience, albeit just last season. But I think I would be happy with either of those two. I think I'd actually probably leaning more towards Lavia, just because, like I said, he's played in the Premier League. He's got a little bit of experience of that already. With Thuram, it's a bit of a, not an unknown, but it's a bit more of a risk, I guess, in terms of how he'll adapt to the league. We see some players come to the Premier League, they just hit the ground running straight away. Others, doesn't quite happen. It could take 1 or 2 seasons to get up to speed. So if Liverpool really want this midfield, new midfield to take shape immediately, you'd probably want Lavia, someone who could already be ready to do that role. I'm not sure if Thuram would necessarily be ready for it straight away. Klopp likes to bed players in gradually, as we've seen in the past. He doesn't sort of just throw them in, but I guess he'd have more scope to do that with Lavia than Thuram. So I think I would probably go for Lavia, to be honest.
I've got to be honest, I would probably go with Thuram. I could base all of that on the worst pass I've ever seen on the final day of the season, which is a small bit of data to work on, but it was one bad pass. But the way I see it is that you're buying Nice's big fish, and okay, you take them into a much bigger pond at Liverpool, but as we've seen with Szoboszlai and McAllister, then they come in with a bit of ego and they back themselves a little bit. Whereas I wonder with the Lavia, with limited experience at the highest level, whether it would be difficult for him. But I suppose the good thing about this position is that this is the one of the three midfielders that they sign where I feel like they've got more time to bed anyone in, because I think Fabinho will certainly start the season there. They will have Trent alongside him, and whoever they sign can come in. They can play several games. They can play in the Europa League. They can get used to the way Liverpool play. And as we saw with Fabinho in that position, it might be the one position where they need a bit more time to get used to the way Liverpool play. I also think on the flip side of this that there's a chance, and I'm not saying that they definitely will, but there's a small chance Liverpool could also say it's the one position we don't need to sign this year and try and push that over to next year. I hope they don't do that. But Sean, is Romeo the type of guy you want to be with? You get that reference, Sean?
Lovely reference. Yeah, I think that might go over young Tom's head. But I'm onto that. Yeah. 21 seconds and all that. Lovely. I can't even remember the question now. It's just
good. It was Romeo. Is he the type of guy you want to be with?
Oh yeah. Well. I think whether he's the type of guy Liverpool want to be with, it all depends on what the long-term plan is for that number 6 role in this new system. Let's say, which I believe they are, that Liverpool are committing to this new system. I actually think, and this is not going off extensively, I haven't watched them, I can't claim to have done that, but looking at the numbers and the kind of profiles of these two players, I think they're quite different, or they're potentially quite different. So if you want someone who blocks, intercepts, tackles, albeit he's a little bit better seemingly at taking players on than Fabinho, I think you go for Lavia. And you both make interesting points about him probably being a little bit more Premier League ready, despite the fact that he is younger. He played 29 games in the Premier League last season. So that's almost 3 times as many top flight English games as Besetic has played, for example. So, it's a good spread of games for him. So I think he's your option if you want a number 6 who is more of a traditional number 6. But where Thuram really interests me, I think if you look at Klopp and Guardiola and a lot of just top level managers really over the last 10, 15 years, one hallmark of them is every time they try and adapt their team or change what it's trying to do tactically, the question they seem to ask themselves is, how can I get one more attacker on the pitch? You think about what Pep's doing right now. I think Pep's clearly won the latest round of who's going to innovate tactically, the best, the most effectively. The box midfield, the hybrid fullback thing, or hybrid centre half, if you want to say, with whatever he's done with John Stones, basically has worked and has been great. Liverpool are following up on that now. Obviously, Klopp's done it, hasn't he, in terms of having 2 fullbacks who are effectively wingers. Liverpool playing 3-2-5, whatever you want to call that. A Liverpool's pomp under Klopp. That was interesting. But Thuram, I wonder whether, he's a player clearly who can play in a lot of positions. He's versatile, which has been something that very much Liverpool seem to be targeting, doesn't it? If you look at McAllister, you look at Szoboszlai, it's players who can play a variety of midfield roles. I think Thuram would bring you that. But I really like the idea of him as a number 6 who can be progressive on the ball, as well as a solid defensive shield. And I think Thuram's 6'4" and Lavia's 5'11", and that, as well, I just think this Liverpool team could do with a bit more bulk, a bit more height, a bit more physicality. So in that respect, I think I'd be with you, Joe. I'd lean towards Thuram slightly. I'd be greedy and say I'd love them both in a long-term sense. If at some point, maybe certainly not this season, but in a year, 18 months, you're thinking, has Fabinho run his race? I think you'd have 2 excellent options here. But let's not forget there's Besetic as well, isn't there? And we talked about Henderson a little bit so far, and I think that's the bank of midfield he'll be in this season for me. I don't think we'll see much of Henderson in the 2 attacking roles in this box midfield. I think he'll be dropped back into the other ones. I might be totally wrong on that, but the run he had in the team as that right-sided attacking midfielder, I think that was just because he was the captain. He had to be on the pitch. He was, he can absorb tactical instructions. He can tell others what to do. But surely, as he continues to age, and especially given the 2 players who've been signed, I think we'll see him more in one of the defensive roles. So you've got a lot of options there. But yeah, I would lean towards Thuram, but greedy, in a greedy long-term sense, I think it would be great to have them both, because I do see them as quite different players.
You make an interesting point about Henderson. I think you're right, but I think with Henderson you might see him become a bit more of the James Milner going forward, and I don't think he'll play right back, left back, but I think in midfield he will be asked to play in all of those different roles, and use his experience at times when they need him and slot him where needed, and he won't be an automatic starter, of course. But at least with Henderson, you have that flexibility, and he takes on that role in the squad. The bit of the old head. So that'd be interesting. Like you, I think Thuram. I think both of those players offer slightly different things, don't they? Thuram offers the evolution of that position, whereas Lavia, and it might be that Liverpool want to see how it all works, but perhaps Lavia is just freshening up Fabinho. But there's another element, Tom, and you are learning a language, and I'm not going to ask you to answer this in Spanish, but I do think this is something that perhaps people don't take into account. But what I found was really interesting is Szoboszlai could speak perfect English. In his interviews, you could see him very confident. Obviously, McAllister has been in England for a couple of years and seems to speak English. And having read about Liverpool's slight issues with getting Darwin Núñez up to the right level English-wise, Keita, of course, was a player who, by all accounts, didn't speak the best English when he was at Liverpool. Do you think these are little fine details that the clubs look at, because it makes things far easier on the pitch to communicate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's hard learning a language.
It is.
As you well know.
It is. May be something they take into account, but I'm not sure.
It's not going to be the deal breaker.
Yeah.
But don't you think that? I mean, all right, if they're talented as Darwin Núñez, I'm sure Liverpool put that to one side, but they need English speakers in the squad, especially when you're losing.
But you say that Firmino didn't really speak much English, and he, was one of the best, most intelligent players in the team. So
I often used to think that was Firmino. I used to say he didn't speak some English, but I think he could maybe speak more than he was letting on.
I'm not sure. I don't think it's as big of an issue as people make it to be. I think the players, they have the little groups which they'll speak, with people who are from their country. There's always a way around it. Like they only need certain words in certain moments if they're learning the language as well. So I think that's something they would work around if it was a problem.
All right, big man, say that again in Spanish. Sean, is that just me with a theory, or are you not on board with that?
What, just in terms of how important it is in training behind the scenes?
I think it's really interesting that they've signed two players that one who's been in England for a couple of years, and I think McAllister can speak the language, but certainly Szoboszlai could. Obviously, there've been recent issues with Darwin Núñez, getting him up to speed in English, and something Klopp actually mentioned in press conferences that he can't take instruction as well. Keita obviously had issues. I don't know whether anyone read James Pearce's piece on The Athletic about him, but very interesting. And yes, he likes eggs. But these are things that I do think. I think that the high-level football clubs look at every detail, and I think there are certain things that perhaps Liverpool will have had their, I wouldn't say fingers burnt, because that's a bit much, but will have learned lessons of other signings and therefore wanted to make sure that they get in each signing. Do you not think that's Sean?
No, I think you might well be right there. I think there's, it's difficult with Núñez because you, in no sense do we want to write him off at this point. But I agree with you that it's telling that Klopp's come out and said that. It's obviously at the very least it's a bit of a kick up the backside for him, isn't it? But Klopp's not really a manager over his tenure at Liverpool who's come out and publicly criticised players that much. I wouldn't have thought. I can't really remember too many occasions. So okay, part of it is almost he's trying to give a new signing more time, but the tone of it does suggest, not regret, but just that he's got work to do off the pitch, almost certainly. But I think going back to what you guys said before about Milner and the fact that Klopp wanted him, but it was a deal that was taken out of his hands, seemingly. That's how it read when all the quotes came out when Milner left, from what player, manager, and everyone said about it. I think there's been a bit of a return. And you can't necessarily put this on one man. Mike Gordon coming back into the kind of picture behind the scenes. It does feel like some more grown-up decisions, kind of sensible long-term decisions, like proper Liverpool decisions, are being made behind the scenes. And that's not to dig anyone out individually. I think it's just been difficult, hasn't it? You know, like plans have gone to the wall for various reasons. And as you guys referenced, you break last season into thirds, and the first third of it, even starting in the summer with Jota and Diaz and others, injury was the story. And like, you know, the best laid plans from the summer, even though I don't think they were laid very well in the summer, it couldn't come to fruition. But yeah, I agree. I think you're right. That, you know, recruitment and language is a massive deal. But I think there's other hints and other elements that suggest just things are being done in a more sensible, long-term and thoughtful way this summer.
Cool. Well, we'll finish off with a quick chat about Steven Gerrard. Tom, he's on the verge of a move to Saudi Arabia by the looks of things. He had said a couple of weeks back, has it been that?
Yeah.
Time moves quickly, doesn't it? A couple of weeks back, he had said that deal didn't look like it was on the cards. James Pearson in the Athletic reporting that that's changed. He's set to U-turn and join the Saudi Pro League. What are your thoughts on that? Disappointment at all, or money talks?
It's a bit of a strange move. Yeah, I mean, it's strange enough to see all the players going there. I mean, we know why they're going, but it's a bit disappointing to see so many players going there, because it's not, as much as Ronaldo wants to big it up as this major league that's going to have the best players in it, and it's going to be one of the top 5 leagues. I don't think it's going to ever reach that point. The amount of players they can bring in, I don't ever see it getting to that. So I do wonder why he's going there. I mean, I know it's an opportunity to get back into management, but the level he's going to be managing at, it's not exactly a standard to be tested at. It's, although there are some good players that are going there, we've seen Kante, Neves, Benzema, these kind of players going there. Mane, other players now being linked. I just don't think it's somewhere that he's really going to get a great learning experience.
That's it. It's a end of your career place, not. And I know for Gerrard, it's the start of his managerial career. Surely, are you disappointed at all to see Steven Gerrard go there?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I think what he's got on his side is his age. I mean, he's only 43. So, as much as it felt like he had really good grounding at Liverpool and then really kicked on at Rangers and did very well, I think, it was always difficult to kind of estimate how much a good spell in Scottish football would translate elsewhere, especially when, you go to one of the 2 big clubs and you do well at them. It's always going to be one of those at the top, isn't it? But I think he was on a bit of an upward curve then. But I'd say he's got time on his side. So, like you say, this will be a mega bucks deal. And if he's there for 2 seasons, okay, it effectively puts his career development on pause, I'd argue, because even if he fills his squad now with, 29, 30, 31-year-olds who are coming over for one last big payday, but they are talented players, that's the thing, isn't it? It does look like some kind of elite level players are going over there to play. So I'm sure he'll have a decent squad at his disposal, which will be good for him as a manager, won't it? He'll be developing and working with good talent. But I still think, let's say he does well there for 2 seasons and manages well and wins the league. I wouldn't see a Premier League team taking a punt on him off the back of that. I think he'll still have to come back and drop down to the Championship, or maybe go to Germany, Dutch League, something like that, try something a little bit different, as we discussed on previous pods. So I think it just puts him on pause. But can you really blame him for going and doing it? Not really. He's only 43 and he could sacrifice a couple of years there and go and do that, no problem. And if it didn't work out and he didn't fancy management, he's given it a good crack, hasn't he? He can come back and do punditry and rest safe in the knowledge that he's done better than Gary Neville did at Valencia, or however he wants to justify it. So I don't know. I think given his age, it's a bit of a free hit.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what he does after Saudi Arabia, because I wonder whether the grand ambition for his managerial career remains, or whether it is a chance to go and get a good payday. And look, I think you don't want to be disappointed in your heroes, but ultimately I think money does talk, and I think it's really easy to say and say, oh, why is he going to take the money? But the amount of money that's being thrown around is just mind-boggling stuff. So I just think that does talk. So it'd be interesting to see whether he continues with his, he is willing, like Sean says, to go and drop down to the Championship, or whether it's a case of a couple of years out there, come back and sort of get back in the studio and be a pundit. So, didn't expect that though. I thought he might have gone the Championship. But maybe he just hasn't smoked another offer out, and he thinks that this is the best one out there. So good luck to him wherever he goes. We'll leave it there. On Saturday, the players return to training to step up preparations for 23-24. We'll be back on Friday for another Blood Red podcast, and it feels like things are getting serious. See you then. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.